Okay. So today's topic would be of exceptional handling and sampling. So exceptional handling, since right from the beginning, we have seen different components of ITGC: access, change, incident, IT operations management. So till so far, we have seen that if everything is okay, then how we are testing the controls. Now, since we need to understand if any of the control fails, as an auditor, what would be our next steps? So the very first thing, exceptions, we call it as like any deviation from the process, an exception is found, then we have to see whether it is one-off error or systematic error. So basically, as I told you, whenever we found some errors while doing the testing, as an auditor, you need to have that kind of patience. You should not report the issue immediately to your manager or to your lead. You need to gather some sort of evidences, and you have to be very much sure that there is some issue in this particular process, because if you find any issues in one particular user while testing, and and you sought to report that particular issue, then somebody might come up and say that all the other controls, all the other samples are passing, it's only one of issue, right? Why can't you ignore that a particular issue? So you need to be very much sure whenever you test these kind of controls. The very first thing, whenever you start testing these particular controls, uh, you do the sampling. So when you do the sampling and you start testing it, if for example we take 5 or 10 samples, and out of those 10 samples 3 were failing, so what you do is, instead of reporting that an issue, what you do is you extend the sample size. You select another 10 samples as well. You take the 10 samples, and then you start again the same process of testing that particular controls. Then what would happen is that you might find some errors or some issues in the other 10 samples which you have selected. Now, since you have selected the first set of sample for 10, out of that 3 were failing, you have selected another 10 samples, and out of that 1 or 2 are failing. Now you are very much sure that there is some issue while testing, because there is some really some serious issue, because it's not only one set of samples are having some issues, the other set of samples is also having some issues. Now you go to a stakeholder, or now you go to a control owner, and you tell them that while testing this particular control, I found some issues. So what exactly it is? So can you please provide me a justification for it? So basically someone obviously will come up with a small answer saying that whether it is whether how many samples are failing, is it one or two, so how many you have selected, and out of that how many are failing. So somebody might ask you this particular question. So if you say that 2 samples are failing out of 10, he'll say that okay, 8 are passing rate, can't you ignore that maybe it is one of error or some kind of a thing. But when you say that I have selected another set of samples as well, in that also I found some errors. So it is not like that I can ignore something. So it is really serious issue. Can you please check from your side and provide a business justification for us, or provide a root cause analysis saying that why exactly these things are occurring. So what somebody would do is that he'll go back, check the things, find the root cause, and then report to you saying that what exactly the issue all about. So it can be one-off error, it can be a repeated error. If it is a repeated error, we need to extend the sample size, and then we need to check as well whether there are any secondary controls in place. So whenever we discussed about these controls, we said that access provisioning and deprovisioning is a primary control, and we said user access review is a secondary control. So while checking these kind of things, we also check whether any secondary controls are in place or not. If access provisioning and deprovisioning we are checking and something is failing, it could have caught in that particular user access review at least, which is a secondary control measure. So even if secondary control user access review are not able to caught something in that user access review, then things are really serious. Then your user access review is also not working properly. So in that way, you normally check whether if there are any deviations in the process. And basically, to just give you an example, from my previous experience, where like while testing this particular access deprovisioning, we found around 11 errors, 11 issues, wherein 11 issues were not deactivated, means like 11 users were not deactivated on time. So when we normally it was like we selected the whole population, and out of that we did bit of sampling, and in that particular sampling we found close to 100 odd users who were not deactivated on time. So when we reported this error to the control owner, he took some time, 1 week, one window of week of time, and he came back to us and he said that, Santosh, like out of these 100 users, few of the users are field employees. Field employees in the sense, uh, they are working as a medical representatives, and there are field executives. So they don't submit the resignation in the system. They submit it manually to the manager. The manager takes that manually, and then he will put that in the system whenever he has time. So we have a design process in place where we say that it might take 15 days to 1 month of time to get something noted in the system. So if you can see, out of those 100 users, 100 plus odd users, close to 80 users were no, like close to 60 users were field executive employees. Then we said that, okay, we will ignore that particular, since you have a design in place saying that these kind of employees will take some time to get into the system. So that was the reason there was a delay. Now we were questioning about the 40 plus odd users. Then they said that a few of the users again are absconding. So for absconding, we have a separate process wherein, like, if somebody is absconding, we wait for a period of 1 week, 2 weeks of time, and then we raise a request in the system that this particular person is absconding. Then the legal process gets started. We first intimate through email to that particular person. If we doesn't require receive a response, then we declare that he's absconding. So out of that, if you can see, these are the users who are absconding. So around 30 29 30 users are absconding users. So out of that 100 plus odd users, we ignored around close to 80 90 users. Left over were around 11 users who were not deactivated on time. So when we question that 11, for that 11 users, out of that 11 users, they said that, okay, for these 11 users we have to do a detailed root cause analysis, and we'll get back to you. So when they get back to us, the issue was that out of that 11 users, few of them were moved to some other company. For example, if I take an example of Tech Mahindra and Mahindra Satyam, Tech Mahindra and Mahindra Satyam were got merged into the company. So similarly, these 11 users were such that they moved from Tech Mahindra to Mahindra Satyam, and they were performing the same role and designation. So today was their last day. Tomorrow they have joined that particular Satyam company, and they started working on the same role and same designation. And since there was a bit of emergency in performing some roles, they didn't deactivated, they started using the same user ID which was there in their last company. So that was the reason we were seeing that the user was not deactivated, and he also posted some financial transactions. So basically 11 users were really serious issues where they have posted some financial transactions. So since they have posted some financial transactions, those 11 odd users, then we said that, okay, for these 11 users, we might require a MRC document, which is management review control document. In that, we would require all the information related to what exactly the access control all about, control description, how did you pull the report, out of that how many users were having issues who were not deactivated on time, and out of that 11 users we have found to be very much having some issues. So for those 11 users, uh, there was no design in place that if somebody moves from Tech Mahindra to Mahindra Satyam, their user ID needs to be deactivated on the last working day. But it was not deactivated, and they have started using the same user ID in the next company as well, in the parent company as well. Then, because since they were working on the same roles and responsibilities, they posted some financial transactions as well because they were all from the finance department. So they day in and day out, they have to ensure that they do some financial transactions as well. So we required that MRC document, and they have given us MRC document. There was a design gap, that because of that the users were not deactivated on time, so we asked for a corrective control with timelines and preventive control with timelines. So the corrective control with timelines would be, now, as of now, you deactivate these 11 users, because since their last working days they already over in their last company, you need to deactivate those 11 users as a corrective control measure, and you let us know when you will deactivate these 11 users. The next thing, you have to make sure as a preventive control what are the actions you are going to take place going forward, so that these kind of users should not reoccur again. So what would be the main the process you are going to follow, and what could be the new process or you are going to design to ensure that any users who migrate from Tech Mahindra to Satyam should not use the previous company user ID and start posting some financial transactions. So what are the measures you are going to take place, and what are the design changes you are going to make in your process, so that these issues will not occur again. And moreover, whatever the financial transactions has been done as part of that particular activity, or which was done in the past, so can the management review those transactions and say us that there was no risk to whatever they have done, and if any risk is there. Okay, it just got disconnected. Okay, so you're able to see my screen now, right? Just a second. You able to see my screen now?
Yes, Santoshi.
Okay, just got disconnected in bit.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, that kind of MRC document would be required from your side, just to ensure that the management takes the responsibility that whatever the financial transactions were posted as part of that particular activity, there was no risk to it. And if any risk is there, the management is ready to take that responsibility. And as a corrective control measure, we are going to deactivate those users with the timelines, and as a preventive measure, we are going to make some changes in the design so that these issues will not occur once again. So this kind of MRC document would be required. So basically, whenever we find these kind of deviations in the process, the very first thing as a auditor, we ensure that we should be very much sure shot how to extend the by extending the sample size. We check more number of samples and be sure shot that there is a really serious issue. And then once we see that if when we extended the sample set, we still had users who have not deactivated on time, then we simply ask for the business justification, and we simply listen to what the justification is all about. Based on that, we would require this kind of MRC document, wherein we would require corrective controls with timelines and preventive controls with timelines. So this is what about we do it in exception handling process. Any questions in this? Okay, I haven't heard anything. I guess if somebody was talking, your voice was not audible to me.
Yeah, it's we can proceed to the next
Okay,
question.
okay. So this is what we do it in exceptional handling. And then we have something called as sampling. So right from the beginning, we were talking about sampling, that we are doing this sampling So why exactly we do the sampling? Because it is not feasible for us to test the entire population, because due to cost and time constraints. Because if somebody gives us 100 users to test, we cannot test the entire 100 users. So that is the reason we do the sampling. How we do the sampling? We ensure that we select a population, the entire user list, we call it as a population. Out of that, we select few samples. It can be random sampling as well, and then based on that we do the testing. So basically there are two types of sampling. One is statistical, one is non-statistical. Statistical sampling is nothing but it's called as non-judgmental sampling. It uses the laws of probability where each unit has an equal chance of selection. So it is basically one type of random sampling, statistical sampling. And then we have non-statistical sampling. It is also called as judgmental sampling. Basically, when we say non-statistical sampling, it is also called as judgmental sampling. Auditor basically use their experience and judgment to select the sample. So for example, if you have worked for a particular client, if you are working for a big four and you are working for a particular client, and you are being stick to that particular client year by year. So the next year, whenever you test that particular controls for that particular client, what you do is you use your experience, because since in the last year you know that where exactly were the weaknesses, where exactly there were issues, you exactly know, because based on your experience you know that. So whenever you select the samples, you will see that okay, I'll select the samples in such a way, so I'll focus more of the weakness that were found out in the last year, and I will try to select those samples so that I, if at all I get some gaps in it, my half of the job is over. So I'll use my experience and judgment to select the samples. So that is called as non-statistical sampling. But apart from these statistical and non-statistical sampling, we have other types of sampling as well. We have simple random sampling, which like we randomly select any particular data. It's not like we select even rows, we might select odd rows, and we'll try to test the particular samples. Some few big four use tool called as randomizer, where they will simply use that particular tool, upload that Excel sheet, and the tool itself will do the sampling. So the tool will give the output that this row needs to be selected, that row needs to be selected. Apart from that, few companies also do systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is nothing but if 250 items are there in the population, like if 250 users are there and 25 of them are needs to be selected, then what they do is simply 250 divided by 25, which is up to 10. So every 10th row will be selected for testing. So in that way, they will select 25 samples. Every 10th row, they will select, and they will select 25 samples till 250. And then they will select 25 samples. Then you have haphazard sampling. Haphazard sampling is nothing but in most of the companies, haphazard sampling is also being followed, which is like an unstructured way of doing the sampling, wherein like you don't have any structure. You simply select anything randomly, any particular row or column, and you'll try to ensure that any particular row you'll select, and you'll try to do the testing. Then we have block sampling. Some companies use block sampling as well, wherein like they will select the recent transactions in the entire population, or few recent or few past transactions, and they start using their particular rows for testing. So basically, whenever we talk about testing, doing the sampling, most of the companies follows random sampling only, but every company has a process saying that uh, 10 samples needs to be selected minimum, 25 samples needs to be selected minimum. If the entire population is 1000, they say that we should select at least 25 samples. If the entire population is somewhere around 200, 250, they say that okay, we will select at least 10 samples. So based on the size, the company or the project decides how we are doing the sampling. And if you are an external auditor and you want to do the sampling for the entire year, so you basically what you do is you select few samples from every quarter so that the entire year is being covered. It's not like that you cover some samples only from one quarter. You will select few samples from every quarter so that the entire year gets covered. so that the entire year gets covered. So different techniques are being used. Every company follow a different technique. So if from an interview point of view, if someone really asks you like which sample technique you have used, so better stick to random sampling only. Always say that we are been using the random sampling. So randomly we select the users and then we start testing it. Somebody, if you still wanted to be on the safer side, you can also say that my lead or my manager does the sampling, we simply do the testing part. So you can give that answer as well, because in my previous company, my manager used to do the sampling and he used to give us the list of users to test it. So we were not supposed to do the sampling. So that is also an answer you can give to an interviewer. So these are the different types of sampling we normally have in the sampling. Either it is statistical or non-statistical, or it can be the other samplings as well. But if anyone asks you what are the sampling techniques, they are only two: statistical and non-statistical. So it totally depends on the company which sampling technique they want to use. So whenever you join any particular company, you will come to know what exactly your sampling methodology is all about, and based on that you will stick to that sampling methodology. This is what we have in sampling. So then we have something called as audit phases. So there are three phases of audit. So basically, one of the interviewer did ask me this question: what are the different phases of audit and what exactly happens in each of the phases? The very first phase, where we do the IT risk assessment and scoping. So basically, in the very first phase, we do the risk and control matrix, which is called RACM. Basically, what we do is we connect with the different stakeholders. As I told you earlier, that we connect with the different stakeholders, control owners, and we will ask them what are the controls and what are the risk and what are the controls. Basically, we call that as risk and control matrix. And once they give that particular information, based on that, we will try to do the scoping, and then we will try to see what are the things applicable to that particular project. So if they try to give us user creation, user deletion, then we say that user access provisioning, deprovisioning is applicable, user access review is applicable. So based on that, we do the scoping of that particular application. Once the scoping is done, we enter into the phase two, wherein we connect with the different control owners, try to gather up evidences. Then we try to check the completeness and accuracy part of it by taking some screenshots, and define the sampling techniques as well. So once we take those samples, define those techniques, then we enter into the phase three where we test it, and then we check the effectiveness of it, and we convey the results to the owner, what exactly it is, whether it's pass or fail, are there any exceptions, and based on that we provide communication to the stakeholders as well. And in the last, we do remediation testing. Remediation testing is nothing but, as I told you, like if there are any exceptions and deviations, and you have asked for some MRC document, they give two things, like one is corrective control with timelines and preventive control with timelines. So whenever somebody gives some timelines, you ensure that once the timeline has passed, you do the remediation testing. If somebody has given you timelines and they have told you that they have implemented the corrective controls and they have implemented the preventive controls, then as an auditor, you have the authority to perform remediation testing, where you will again test either the same population, same samples where you have got some exceptions, and at the same time you will also select new samples and try to do the testing just to ensure that whether these things are occurring again or not, and then you communicate the results to all the stakeholders. So these are the different phases of audit, where in the first phase you do the IT risk assessment and scoping, and then you gather audit evidence in the second phase, and in the third phase you perform test procedures. So these are the different three phases of audit. And then we have something called as Then we have something called as defense. So then we have these three lines of defense. So if you can see this, we have these three lines of defense. So if every time like an auditor might ask you like on which level line of defense you are currently working. We are currently working in the third line of defense as an internal auditor. So we are not working in second line of defense or first line of defense. So second line of defense and first line of defense are like a bit of upgrade of third line of defense, because in the second line of defense and first line of defense, you need to be a very subject matter expert in the audit where you work in the second line of defense and first line of defense. So there might be few job descriptions where someone would say that this is the opening for first line of defense or second line of defense, means you will be working into this first line and second line of defense. So just try to understand before getting into those kind of a roles, because if someone is ready to give you some sort of training, then you can get into that first line of defense and second line of defense. But if somebody is not ready to give you training and they expert that you should be a ready resource from day one, then it would be very difficult for you to survive in that second line of defense or first line of defense. Basically, for example, whenever we do this remediation testing and we test the controls and found that even if you have confirmed me that you have implemented few timelines and then you have implemented those things which we have found as a gap, and still when we did the remediation testing we are again finding some issues, then at that particular point of stage you still might require some additional controls in place. So it's not you as an internal auditor will be able to decide that what kind of additional control should be in between to ensure that these kind of the gap should not occur. Then you pass this information to the second line of defense, where these people will try to review the entire control and will try to put some additional controls in place. So that is what the role comes into picture, where the second line of defense and first line of defense comes into picture. So that is the reason whenever somebody asks you which line of defense you are currently working, you are currently working in the third line of defense as an internal auditor. So just stick to that, and you're not working anywhere between second line of defense and first line of defense. So these are the three lines of defense of the internal audit function. Just keep that picture in this mind. I'll forward you this particular link so that you can go through it in case somebody asks you this particular question on the lines of defense. Okay, just a second. I'll stop this recording for a while.